In early 1945, the Second World War was nearing its end. The fall of the Third Reich had become a matter of time. Some of Hitler's military generals urged him to sign the capitulation as soon as possible, for the sake of the country. But the Führer refused to acknowledge defeat. The hope he clung to was the assumption of an imminent conflict between the Allies. In this imagined clash, Germany was to be the spearhead for Britain and the United States against Stalin. The clash predicted by the Führer, which would later enter history as the Cold War, would only ignite after his death. Hitler chose to await change in the capital. But Berlin had already become a trap. The world of the conqueror of Europe had shrunk to a handful of rooms in an underground bunker, where he was forced to hide from Allied air raids. This was the full absurdity of his messianic vision. The man who had brought nearly the entire continent to its knees was now incapable of soberly assessing the situation. By hopelessly delaying the moment of surrender, he condemned millions on both sides to death. At the time of the assault, there were 3 million civilians in Berlin alone, struggling to survive under bombardment and searching for food during brief pauses between street battles. Now Hitler was a prisoner of his own fears, contemplating only one thing: how to end his life by suicide. He was afraid to join his soldiers, fearing he would fall alive into enemy hands. Defeats on all fronts had further weakened the Führer's already fragile health. In his posture, it was difficult to recognize the once expressive orator whose speeches had hypnotized millions and ignited the Second World War.
Hitler's health was in a pitiful state. For many years, he had relied on pills, narcotics, and injections. His hands trembled constantly.
Due to spinal problems, he spent more and more time lying on a couch. By 1945, Hitler's cabinet held 80 drug preparations. Due to back pain, he could barely walk more than 30 meters unaided. Memory lapses and depression added to his condition. Joseph Goebbels tried to dispel the depression. On Hitler's birthday, April 20, 1945, Goebbels ordered small flags and greetings on Berlin's ruined streets. Berlin is shattered, but our hearts are not. A meeting with members of the Hitler Youth was meant to boost morale, young boys whom the Nazis sent to die in street combat. These are the final living images of the leader of the Third Reich. Less than 10 days remained until his death. While Hitler waited in the bunker for General Wenck's army to break the blockade, Marshal Zhukov's troops reached the outskirts of Berlin, coming within 17 kilometers of the bunker. The explosions of shells near the Reich Chancellery came as a complete surprise to the Führer. Until then, the military hid the Red Army's rapid advance, hoping to repel it with counterattacks. But the balance of power was unequal, 1-3, not in favor of the Nazis. The atmosphere in the Führer bunker worsened with each passing day. The stale air, reeking of shoes and toilets, heightened the despair. Information for the Führer was no longer delivered by couriers, but taken from BBC broadcasts.
British and American forces, together with the Red Army, delivered another blow to the Nazi troops. On April 25 at 1400 hours, Allied forces met on the Elbe, 75 miles south of Berlin.
Soviet troop movements in Berlin were tracked using the city's phone directory. If Russian was heard on the line, it meant the street had been captured. Hitler declared he would take his own life rather than be taken prisoner. He erupted in rage, shouting that everyone had betrayed him. That included General Wenck, who failed to carry out the order to break through to encircle Berlin and instead helped evacuate thousands of refugees. The Führer was again seized by fury upon learning of the betrayal by his closest allies, Göring and Himmler. Eva Braun tried to console him. 26 years younger than Hitler, the former photographer for the Nazi Party appeared in the bunker without permission and, despite orders to leave, remained by his side until death. Braun had been his lover for the last 14 years. Their relationship was kept out of the public eye. Nazi propaganda crafted the image of a free and unattached man, keeping Hitler appealing to his female admirers. Eva Braun, though it was difficult, agreed to stay in the shadows and remained there until her final breath. Only in her last moments did she receive what she had long desired. On the night before April 29th, a wedding took place in the Führer's bunker. Eva Braun became the official wife of Adolf Hitler.
They were married to the thunder of Soviet artillery. As she signed the marriage certificate, Eva began writing her surname with the letter B, then corrected it to H, and told everyone, "Now you may call me Frau Hitler." Until then, she had always been addressed as Fraulein.
After the wedding, Hitler withdrew for several hours to write his will and a few letters. But soon he seemed to avoid solitude. He wandered in circles like a living ghost. In a state of apathy, he sank fully into his delusions, contemplating suicide. Everyone around him moved as if in a dream. His closest aides smoked openly, despite Hitler's hatred of tobacco. Even Eva Braun, who had never smoked before, held a cigarette that day. No one paid attention to the officers who were cheering themselves up with schnapps. On the morning of April 30th, Hitler was warned the bunker could be overrun at any moment. Soviets were only 200 meters from the Reich Chancellery. Due to heavy shelling, Hitler could not go upstairs to breathe fresh air. He instructed his adjutant, Otto Gunscher, to find several canisters of gasoline to burn himself and his newlywed wife. At around 1 o'clock, Hitler and Eva Braun sat down for a brief lunch, pasta with broccoli. Then came farewells to those remaining in the bunker. After that, they retreated to Hitler's private study. At approximately 3:30 p.m., a gunshot rang out.
Goebbels and I rushed into the room. We saw Eva Braun seated on the sofa. Her head rested on Hitler's left shoulder. There were no visible wounds on her body. She had died from poison. Hitler had shot himself in the mouth. Blood streamed from both of his temples.
The bodies were wrapped in rugs and taken to the Reich Chancellery garden. The burial was brief. No long speeches. The farewell was interrupted by shell explosions. Martin Bormann and Joseph Goebbels threw the corpses into a shell crater, doused them with gasoline, and set them on fire. 24 hours later, Soviet soldiers captured the Führer bunker. In the courtyard of the Reich Chancellery, they found two corpses, a man and a woman. Hitler was identified by his dental prosthetics. Soviet authorities specifically sought out Hitler's personal orthodontist. After the war, the Führer's remains were buried 8 times across various Soviet military bases. His dental prosthetics were sent to Moscow as evidence. They remain there to this day. Russian officials continue to refuse DNA testing of these remains, which fuels numerous conspiracy theories. One of them suggests that Adolf Hitler, the man who held half the world in fear and was responsible for the deaths of 55 million people, may have staged his own suicide.